Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're doing another deep dive today, this time into some ideas from Jiddu Krishnamurti. Have you heard of him?
I have, yeah. Very influential thinker. 20th century, kind of a philosopher, kind of a spiritual teacher. Hard to pin down, really.
Yeah, and that's part of what makes his work so interesting to dig into. We're looking at his reflections on authority and the self, specifically from this text, Reflexiones sobre el yo. The chapter is called Autoridad.
Okay, so we're diving into Krishnamurti's thoughts on authority. I like it. He definitely wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo.
That's for sure. And one of the things that struck me right away is this idea of an internal revolution. He talks about how real change has to start from within, from a radical shift in our own consciousness.
It's not about fixing the external world, right? It's about this inner transformation, a revolution that starts with each individual.
Exactly. And he doesn't sugarcoat things either. He talks about the human condition in this very raw and honest way, how we're all this mix of violence and peace, tenderness and aggression.
He's really saying, look, we have to take responsibility, not just for our actions in the world, but for what's happening inside our own minds, for those inner battles we're all fighting.
Yeah, like when you know you should eat a salad, but you grab the pizza instead. Those moments of inner conflict, right?
Exactly. And Krishnamurti doesn't just point out those inner struggles. He connects them directly to this idea of authority.
Okay, so how does our own inner revolution, this inner struggle, connect to authority?
Well, he argues that one of the biggest obstacles to that inner revolution is our dependence on external authorities.
Like gurus or experts, people telling us what to think and do.
Yeah, or even just anyone we see as having the answers we're seeking. Could be a priest, a politician, even someone with a lot of followers online.
I can see that, especially these days with social media. It's so easy to fall into that trap of looking for answers outside ourselves.
It's like we're hardwired to seek out authority figures. But Krishnamurti challenges us to question that impulse. He calls it the illusion of external authority.
The illusion. So he's saying it's not even real, it's an illusion.
Well, it might feel real, but he'd say it's an illusion in the sense that it prevents us from looking within for our own answers.
Yeah.
He has this really interesting example. He says, imagine an intelligent person living in a free society.
Okay.
This person would likely reject the idea of living under totalitarian rule, right?
Right, because someone else would be dictating their every move.
Exactly. But then he says that same person might turn around and readily accept the authority of, say, a psychologist or a spiritual guru, someone promising them happiness or fulfillment.
Oh, wow. I see what you mean. It's like we reject one form of authority, this really overt form, but then we hand over our power in other, more subtle ways.
Precisely. And Krishnamurti would say that until we start to question that impulse, that deep-seated need for external guidance, we'll never truly be free.
So it's not about rejecting all external guidance, but about recognizing when it might be holding us back.
Absolutely. It's about questioning, being discerning, and ultimately taking ownership of our own journey.
Okay, that makes sense. But it's definitely a challenge to break free from that desire for easy answers, to actually think for ourselves.
It is. But that's where things get really interesting because Krishnamurti doesn't stop there. He also challenges us to question what he calls psychological authority.
Psychological authority. Okay, now you've got me intrigued. What does that even mean?
So we've talked about external authority, right?
Yeah.
The gurus, the experts, the people we look to for answers. But psychological authority is about the authority we unknowingly bestow upon ourselves.
Okay, so like being our own worst critic, being really hard on ourselves.
That's part of it, but it goes deeper than that. It's about clinging to our own beliefs, our conclusions, our opinions, as if they were absolute truths, as if they were the only way to see the world.
Oh, I see. So it's like our own personal dogma, the rules we create for ourselves, even if they're not serving us.
Exactly. And Krishnamurti argued that this form of self-created authority can be even more insidious because it comes from within. We can spend years, even a lifetime, trapped in a prison of our own making without even realizing it.
It's like we become our own inner dictators, clinging to our limited perspectives.
Exactly. And the more we cling to those limited perspectives, the harder it becomes to truly see ourselves and the world around us clearly.
And the thing is, we might not even realize we're doing it right, creating these mental prisons for ourselves.
Right. It's like we're trapped in these unconscious patterns of thinking. Krishnamurti would say that's precisely why it's so important to examine these patterns, to bring them into our conscious awareness.
So it's not just about recognizing the patterns, but questioning whether they're actually serving us, whether they're aligned with who we truly are.
Exactly. It's about asking ourselves, is this belief, this pattern, this way of being, is it helping me live a more authentic and fulfilling life? Or is it holding me back?
You know, it makes me think about that saying, the unexamined life is not worth living.
Oh, Socrates. Yeah, I see the connection. Krishnamurti might say something similar, though. He was all about self-inquiry, really understanding ourselves and the motivations behind our actions.
It's like shining a light into those dark corners of our minds, the ones we usually try to avoid.
Exactly. And that can be scary. But Krishnamurti believed that true freedom, true understanding, could only come from confronting those shadowy parts of ourselves.
And that's where fear comes into play, right? We cling to these patterns, these limiting beliefs, because they offer a sense of security, even if it's a false sense of security.
Absolutely. We're afraid of what might happen if we let go. Afraid of the unknown. Afraid of failing.
It makes me think about that Anais Nin quote. And the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom.
I love that quote. It speaks to the courage it takes to break free from those comfortable patterns, to embrace the unknown. And Krishnamurti believed that everyone has that capacity for courage, that it's within each of us to confront our fears and step into our full potential.
But he doesn't offer a step-by-step guide for doing that, does he? It's not like he hands us a map and says, here's how to live a fearlessly authentic life.
He doesn't. And that's because he didn't believe in those kinds of rigid frameworks or formulas. He believed that real transformation, real understanding, comes from a much deeper place.
From within.
Exactly. From
Right.
self-observation.
Yeah.
From a deep and honest inquiry into our own experiences, our thoughts, our feelings, our reactions to the world around us. He would say, don't just take my word for it, explore it for yourself.
Okay, so where do we even start? If we're so caught up in these patterns, these limiting beliefs, how do we even begin to observe them objectively? It's like trying to see our own reflection without a mirror.
Well, Krishnamurti would say the first step is to cultivate a quality of attention, to really pay attention to what's happening within ourselves and around us. He said most of us go through life on autopilot, reacting to things unconsciously.
Oh, I know I do that. Especially when I'm stressed or busy. It's like I'm just going through the motions.
And it's in those moments when we're on autopilot that those unconscious patterns really take over.
So how do we break free from that? From the autopilot?
By becoming more present, more aware. Krishnamurti believed that awareness was the key to unlocking our true potential. He often used the analogy of a scientist observing an experiment. He said we need to approach our own lives with that same spirit of inquiry, that same willingness to observe without judgment.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between naive optimism and crippling fear, where we're awake to the realities of the world, but not paralyzed by them.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Krishnamurti believed that true freedom wasn't about escaping from the difficulties of life, but rather about meeting them head-on with a sense of awareness and compassion. He often talked about the importance of cultivating a choiceless awareness, a state of being where we're present to our experiences without judgment or resistance.
Choiceless awareness. I love that phrase. Tell me more about what he meant by that.
Essentially, he was talking about a way of moving through the world where we're not constantly trying to control or manipulate our experiences. It's about letting go of the need to force things to be a certain way, and instead, simply allowing ourselves to be present to what is without judgment or resistance.
That sounds incredibly liberating, but also incredibly challenging. It's like we're so conditioned to judge our experiences, to label them as good or bad, right or wrong. How do we even begin to cultivate that kind of choiceless awareness?
Krishnamurti believed that it began with a willingness to pay attention to our thoughts, our emotions, our physical sensations, and to the world around us. He often used the analogy of meditation, saying that in meditation, we train our minds to become still and observant, to simply observe the flow of thoughts and sensations without getting caught up in them.
So it's about developing a kind of inner observer, a part of ourselves that can witness our experiences without judgment or attachment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he believed that the more we could cultivate this quality of choiceless awareness, the more we could start to see through the illusions that keep us trapped in suffering illusions about ourselves, about others, about the world around us.
That makes me think about his ideas on conformity. He seemed to believe that conformity was a major obstacle to this kind of self-awareness, that it prevented us from seeing the world and ourselves clearly.
You're absolutely right. Krishnamurti was extremely critical of conformity, believing that it stifled creativity, stifled individuality, and ultimately led to a life of quiet desperation. He believed that when we conform to external expectations, whether they're societal norms, cultural beliefs, or even just the expectations of those around us, we betray our own inner truth.
That makes me think about the pressure to fit in, especially when we're younger. It's like we're taught from a very young age that being different is bad, that we need to conform to be accepted.
And this pressure doesn't magically disappear when we become adults. It often just takes on more subtle forms, showing up in our careers, our relationships, even in our spiritual lives.
It's so true. It makes me think about all the times I've held back from saying or doing something because I was afraid of judgment or rejection.
Krishnamurti would say that those moments of holding back are precisely the moments we need to pay attention to. He believed that those were the moments when we were being called to step into our authenticity, to honor our own unique voice, even if it meant risking disapproval or rejection.
That takes a lot of courage, doesn't it? To be willing to stand out from the crowd, to be different.
It does. And Krishnamurti believed that cultivating that kind of courage was an essential part of the inner revolution he was talking about. He believed that true freedom could only be found on the other side of our comfort zones, on the other side of our fears.
So it's about finding the courage to be ourselves, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it means going against the grain.
Exactly. And he believed that this journey of self-discovery, this willingness to question everything, to challenge our beliefs, to step outside our comfort zones, wasn't just a selfish pursuit. He saw it as a deeply spiritual practice, as a way of connecting with something bigger than ourselves.
So it's not just about personal growth, but about contributing to something larger than ourselves. It's about recognizing that our individual journeys are interconnected with the collective.
Exactly. He believed that when we commit to our own inner transformation, we inevitably contribute to the transformation of the world around us. He often said that the only way to create a more peaceful and just world was to start with ourselves.
That's a powerful message, and it feels like a hopeful one too. It's a reminder that even in the midst of chaos and uncertainty, we each have the power to make a difference, to create positive change, simply by choosing to show up authentically in our own lives.
That's the essence of Krishnamurti's message, and it's one that continues to resonate with people all over the world. He wasn't offering a set of dogmas or beliefs to follow blindly, but rather a set of tools for self-discovery, for questioning everything, for cultivating a deep and abiding sense of freedom within ourselves, and in doing so, creating a more just and compassionate world.
It's a powerful legacy, and one that invites us to embark on our own journeys of self-discovery, to question everything, to cultivate a deep and abiding sense of freedom within ourselves, and in doing so, contribute to the creation of a more just and compassionate world. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the profound and challenging ideas of Jiddu Krishnamurti. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep listening to that still, small voice.